Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the December 16th Dare County Board of Commissioners meeting. At this time, I'd like to call on the Reverend David Morris to lead us in a prayer invocation. Is he here this evening? Oh, there he is, back here in the back. Good evening, Reverend. Good to see you.
And thank you again from the North Dare Ministerial Association for the opportunity to be here. Please join me in prayer. Spirit of life and of love, God of many names, whose highest name is always love and compassion. We begin this time of business, of work, in gratitude for the beauty and bounty of this place where we live, for the many good people who go to make our life together so bountiful and rich, for all the gifts of living with the ability to govern ourselves, and for all of the great responsibilities that conveys upon us. Dear one, we acknowledge that we live even in this beautiful and bountiful place in a time of great inequality. There are those who are comfortable in their homes, who celebrate this holiday season in the recognition of generosity and good cheer. And there are those who struggle and whose housing is inadequate and who may not have the means to celebrate at all. May we always recognize that our choices affect all who live here. We give thanks for all of those who work for this county, in this area, and all that they do, both paid and volunteers. We give thanks especially for those leaders who give of their time, their energy, and their great commitment to continue to make this a good place for us all. May we ever be conscious of all that is holy as we do our work together. This we ask each of us in the name which is most holy to us. Amen.
Amen. May we stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we continue, I'd just like to recognize a few folks here with us this evening. Karen Brown. Karen, thank you for being here this evening, Executive Director at OBX Chamber. Thank you, Karen. We have Joe Hurd here with us this evening. He has 6 of his Troop 165 here this evening with us. Joe, thank you all for being here. These young men are working on their citizenship in the community merit, for the community merit badge, and part of that's participating and learning more about government functions. So, gentlemen, thank you all for being here this evening. Joe, thank you for having your troop here with us this evening. County Manager.
Chairman, item 1 on the agenda is the opening remarks from the chairman.
Thank you, County Manager. A little busy last week, week and a half. I made I believe it's like 24 presentations now, I believe, isn't it, Dorothy, somewhere in that neighborhood, to the Manio Rotary on Monday, the 2nd of December. A COA presentation. Had a nice little crowd there, and I was pleased to tell them about our board's initiative with COA and what we're doing, what we're going to be doing in Manio, and certainly our scholarship program for our students. So it was a really good turnout that evening, and I was happy to make that presentation with them. On a sadder note, the very next day, I was honored to be asked to do the eulogy for Ray Sturza, who was the former planner for Dare County for many years and retired from the county, and mayor of Kill Devil Hills. And really had a real good turnout, and it was my honor to be able to give that eulogy for a very dear friend. He will be sorely missed. On that Friday, the Baum Center once again had their Christmas celebration at the Baum Center, and I attended that for the adult folks in our community. They continue to just do a great job at the Baum Center, and our students from the middle school were there once again to perform, and we had some elderly tap dancers there, so always had, and a great lunch, and I want to commend the Baum Center for what they do for our older adults in Dare County. Hats off to my fellow Commissioner Bateman, Urban Bateman. We, on that evening, that Friday evening, Sugar Creek had a holiday buffet that proceeds went to the room in the inn. That is a huge function. It was, Urban, I didn't get the full account, but I know you had tremendous turnout that evening.
It was good, and I believe they raised like $15,000.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
280 some people, I believe.
Yeah, well, Commissioner Bateman, they host that at his restaurant, and all that hard work goes into that, and from a number of restaurants participating, and I commend you for what you do there, Commissioner, and it really was a good turnout, and food was pretty daggone good too.
Had a lot of good restaurants.
A lot of good restaurants. Yeah. So I also had the pleasure of on Wednesday, the 11th, to once again address the chamber legislative session here in this room and talk about our board's activities and our projects that we've have ongoing and the successes we had in 2019 and what to expect in 2020 on our plate. And they had a good turnout there as well. And then I'd also just two other things to follow up. Once again, I'd like to reiterate, let the public know we're live now, that I will be giving the state of the county on Wednesday, the 15th of January at Captain George's at 8 o'clock in the morning. So if you're available, we certainly look forward to having you attend. It will be the kickoff of our 150th anniversary for Dare County, and I will incorporate the successes that this board has had in 2019 and incorporate that with the 150 celebration of Dare. And certainly last but not least, I want to wish my fellow citizens a very prosperous New Year and a very Merry Christmas. And I hope each and every one of you out there that are listening will have a successful 2020. And I thank my fellow board members and wish each and every one of you a very Merry Christmas and Happy New Year as well. County Manager?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. That brings us to item 2 on the agenda. That's public comment. Ladies and gentlemen, now's the time that's been set aside for public comment. If you have public comment this evening and you've not signed up, please raise your hand. I'll recognize you. When I do, please come to the podium. State your name and where you're from. When the green light comes on, your time begins. You need to limit your comments to 5 minutes. When the yellow light comes on, you have about a minute left. And when the red light comes on, you need to conclude your remarks. If you're here to talk about the text amendment to the Highway 345 Business Zoning District, please wait on that. That's a time-specific public hearing. That'll be done around 5:30, depending on where we are in the agenda. So if you're talking about that, please wait until then to comment. Is there any public comment this evening? Anyone here for public comment? I see no hands here. Is there any public comment in Buxton?
No comment in Buxton. No comment from Buxton.
No comment from Buxton. With that, Mr. Chairman, we would close the public comment. Item 3 is the text amendment I just spoke of. Again, that's time sensitive, so we need to wait until 5:30. With your permission, I'd move on to items items 4, 5, and 6.
Yes, sir, absolutely.
Item 4, 5, and 6 are all related. Ken Wilson's here to make presentations. Brent Johnson, our waterways person, is here as well to answer questions from our perspective if you need him. And with that, Ken, I'll leave it to you to do items 4, 5, and 6.
All right,
Good
perfect.
evening, Ken, and welcome this
Hey,
evening.
thank you very much. Good to be up here. Got a little bit of a cold today, so pardon my scratchy voice. Too many sick kids at home. I could only avoid so many of them before they got the best of me. I think we got a couple of slides. Maybe if we can get those up. He's coming. All right. Move these forward. All right. So the last time I was up here was August, and we went through, we had been talking a little bit with staff about sort of a feasibility type level plan of looking at dredge disposal needs throughout the entire county and coming up with basically a list of potential options for how these dredge materials could be used to the benefit of the county, and also to develop capacity for dredging these channels so that the Corps of Engineers in their capacity could continue to maintain the federal channels that they have responsibility for. I know you all are pretty familiar, but for anybody that's watching, obviously the Corps does a good job of maintaining these channels throughout Dare County and throughout the state. But part of the agreement with them maintaining these channels is that once the facilities that they use to put that material into is at capacity, that it's the local sponsor's responsibility to come up with additional facilities where that material can be placed. And for a lot of the channels, the federal channels in Dare County, that local sponsor is the county. So the Corps had reached out to the county about starting to look into how you could develop additional capacity for these channel projects throughout the long term. So back in August, we provided a proposal that would basically look countywide. This is kind of a map that shows, the northern limit being the northern boundary of Duck, the southern limit being basically the Hatteras Inlet, and the western limit basically being the Alligator River there, and that we would look at potential channel, both federal and non-federal areas in there that need that have dredge projects where you would need to develop dredge spoil facilities and capacity in the future. Not only those federal projects, but if we were going to look at it, we'd take more of a comprehensive approach to that. So at the time, the board, I believe, thought that was a decent idea, but because that wasn't originally budgeted, wanted to put this off a little bit further into the budget cycle to see how the budget was going, whether or not to spend contingencies on this. Subsequently, after that meeting, when I was here in August, the Corps approached county staff about a couple of different more pressing issues with some projects down in the southern part of the county, specifically the Rollinson Channel project, that they wanted to do a maintenance job in 2021, 2022, I believe, to bring in a contract cutterhead dredge, but that at this point in time, they would want to put it in their plan and fund it, but they had no place to put that material, and that they would really need the county to come up with some options on where to put that material. So that changed this idea of just coming up with sort of doing a feasibility study to something more concrete, that we had a goal of a specific project that we needed capacity for. Shortly after that, the Corps also suggested that either in that same year or maybe the following year, 2022, they were also looking at a contract dredge project where they would do some of what they call the Manio Channel interior channels, which is basically that north-south branch that runs from up around Manio all the way down to Oregon Inlet, runs into Wanchese, the two side channels that run in, excuse me, to Manio and Wanchese, and some of those channels back there. So again, we had another project that had more short-term needs than sort of this long-term approach. So Brett and I and Bobby started talking about what were our options. I've been participating with the Dare County Waterways group as well to try to get their feedback on some options on what we could do. And what we came up with was, I'm getting ahead of myself. These two slides here, this needs assessment, this is one aspect of what was included in that initial proposal. So we were going to go through and do all of those things as part of that feasibility study. We talked about some novel concepts such as thin layer placement, using it for living shoreline fill material, using it to stockpile for emergency uses, maybe doing some other shoreline restoration projects throughout the county, and even on these facilities where you might pile up the material, potentially building some recreational access areas. So, like I said, that original proposal was to come up with a number of different dredge material options. And so we knew at that point in time that there are a lot of questions yet to be answered about how feasible are some of those novel ideas that I just presented. What are the costs of permitting this? How long would it take to permit? Do we have the space? How much would it cost to do land acquisition? And so we really want to do some of this study effort, this needs assessment, this understanding of what the options are. But now we know we're on the clock to come up with permits as well. And so what we've done with these updated proposals that you all have in front of you is that we've split it up into two separate proposals. We've got one proposal based on this Rollinson Channel project that the Corps has talked to us about. And we basically expanded beyond Rollinson Channel to say we're gonna conduct that sort of needs assessment and alternatives analysis assessment for everything from Rodanthe all the way down to Hatteras Inlet on the Outer Banks, and that's what we're gonna call the Southern Dare County region. And we're gonna go through, we're gonna do that same work we would have done for that original proposal, the needs assessment and the concept alternative, but we also included funds in there to go through and get the actual permits for at least some of these alternatives so that we've got facilities to use for this Rollinson Channel project that the Corps tells us we need by 2021, 2022. One other aspect of that is the sediment compatibility analysis. And then we also came up with a parallel proposal for what we're calling the central area, which is basically everything from Oregon Inlet going up to Manio in that area. It also includes the Stumpy Point Federal Channel as well. And we'll do the same thing. We'll go through that needs assessment. We'll look and come up with a number of different alternatives. Yes, sir.
Just a real quick one, Ken.
Sure.
Can you give me a scale of magnitude between the southern and the central in terms of activity level? Like 80% is in the southern, 20% in the central, or vice versa?
Sure.
Just so I can balance, because right now my mental picture is they're about equal, 50-50, but I'm guessing that's not right.
The proposal, the dollar amounts that we submitted for the proposals,
No, I saw that.
they are pretty much equal.
I was looking at the actual dredge activity and the amount of materials.
I don't know if at this point in time we can answer that until we get into that needs assessment and really understand, how much is going to go into, we're basically dealing with that Rollinson Channel project that goes out into the Sound,
Right.
the projects that go down towards the Horseshoe, and those are the main projects. We also talk in the proposal about looking at the Rodanthe federal project. And there's also, at least in the needs assessment, we'd like to look at some of the non-federal interests throughout that area as well. So maybe even some of the work that goes to maintain, that right now the state is looking at, that goes to maintaining that Horseshoe. Is that something that Dare County has to have on their radar, or is that really just fall on the state? Are there other interior channels on the backside of Hatteras Island that could potentially need work? There was some discussion about Avon Harbor, things like that. We want to make sure that in this zone, we're not only looking at those federal channels, but we're reaching out to the county and other stakeholders to figure
fair
out
enough.
if there's other things in the
But
in
this
the
does
plan.
not include the inlets.
Correct.
Oregon Inlet, Patterson. Right. I should think so, yeah.
Let me get back to that presentation.
Or the Horseshoe.
All right. So this is just an overview map. This was in the proposal, but this shows the scope of the southern project. That green line up at the very northern part, that's the Rodanthe channel, federal channel, and then that green line down at the south is that's going out into the Sound. That's the Rollinson channel as well. So that anything that would fall in that area is something that we want to at least understand what the long-term dredge maintenance needs are in that area. All right, this is just a zoom in of the Rodanthe Harbor channel. Again, this is the Rollinson channel area and that connector channel. This is a map that Brent actually provided to us, that he had gotten from the Corps of Engineers, but just to give you a little bit of a flavor for some of the options that we want to look at. Obviously, some of the easiest things to do would be, what are the existing dredge material facilities that are out there, and can those be expanded? Some of these confined facilities, can you just raise the levees on the side, or can you expand it out into another cell? I mean, those are sort of some of the low-hanging fruit options that you could do. But we also want to take sort of a holistic approach and look at, are there other benefits that this material could provide? So in this map here, that orange section of the channel, the blue section of the channel, and then the green section of the channel, which really isn't maintained anymore because of the lack of ability to maintain that shortcut across the inlet. But that orange area and blue area are both characterized by the Corps as sandy material. So the question arises is, could we develop a healthy enough relationship with the Park Service that potentially that material could now be placed out on the beach instead of on the backside in one of these facilities? Some of the other projects that we've been involved with Dare County, some of the beach projects that you all have done with other consultants, that relationship has really gotten much stronger over the years, and I think it's worth having some discussions about maybe could that material, if it's the right quality material, be placed out on the beach. Could be a cost savings. It could also work to start to provide some sediment down there. Maybe we can see if that spit wants to start pushing back into that inlet, as opposed to how much we've seen it retreat back over the years. Another sort of novel idea of some of the things that we want to do with this study is, we were just looking at some Google Earth images, and you can see when you come out of the, I don't know if I have a pointer on here or not. All right. The audience can see it. I don't know if you guys can see it. The connector channel that comes out of the jetties there and then goes towards the horseshoe, there are some sand shoals on the north side of that area. But if you go back into Google Earth, this is like a 1998 shot, you can actually see that there's actually some exposed islands north of that connector channel. And those are some of the things that in the past, as we've talked to some of the agencies, that if we can show that there were previous footprints of islands in certain areas, that they don't have such a prohibition about doing open water disposal in some of those areas. So there's the potential that if we could identify what that footprint is and maybe convince them that we could place some of that material just north of the channel, it may provide some wave attenuation protection to the rest of Hatteras Island on the backside, where you may see some flooding in events such as Dorian and things like that. There may be some wave sheltering effects there, and those are some of the concepts that we want to look at in task 1 and 2. The second proposal, that central Dare County area, again, this is kind of the overview map. This really just shows the federal channels. So that main trunk line that goes up just north of Manio, all the way down to Old House Channel, and then the channel that goes out into the Sound. This is the Stumpy Point channel as well. And then you've got these side channels that go into Wanchese and Shallowbag. Those would obviously all be included in the study, but are there other potential non-federal channels in that area, maybe going into the actual harbor, into Wanchese, or some of the other marinas may be considered, at least from the needs assessment side. And these are just zoomed in images of the parts of the channel that we were showing. So I mean, that in a nutshell is the presentation that I have for those two proposals that we have in front of you. It's my understanding that the first step is really to decide if this is something that the county wants to move forward with. Some of the interesting aspects of doing it this way, where we actually have two different projects that the Corps of Engineers has stated there is a need for. Now there's an opportunity that we can include this needs assessment that's clearly necessary to do the full permitting of these two projects. We can include that in this proposal and submit that for grant funding through the shallow draft fund, whereas previously, when we came to you with just sort of a needs assessment, feasibility level assessment, that was not something that the state believed was eligible for that shallow draft fund. So because we have two specific projects from the Corps of Engineers that they want to move forward, we believe that developing these two proposals in the way that we have allows you to seek out state funds to cost share in these two proposals. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ken. Does anyone have any questions of Ken? You have,
Tonight, not asking you to approve the money.
okay.
Just, what's gonna happen is, until we get through the grant cycle and know what we're gonna get in the grant, what we're not, then we don't really know how much money to approve. We know what the costs are, but we don't know what our share will be. We think we do, and you've seen those numbers, I think 51 for one and 49 for the other. If something goes kaflooey in the grant process and it's not what we think, then we can look at the scope. We can decide, do we do the permitting separately or something like that to try to take advantage of that grant money. But the long and the short is that once we get through the grant cycle and see where we are, we're going to come back to you and say, okay, you all said move forward. If you all say move forward, you all said move forward with this. And at that time, we're going to be looking for right at $100,000 or thereabouts to go forward with these projects. And Dave and I'll come to you with a funding source for those. We've been told by the Corps that we really don't have any options. If we're going to continue to have them dredge these inlets and keep them open for our watermen, then we're responsible to find a place to put it. And we don't have anywhere to put it unless we find a place and unless Ken and his crowd can figure out how to permit whatever we do find. I'll tell you, it's going to be a difficult task because we're struggling right now with the Manio project to find where we're going to put 65,000 cubic yards. Some of these projects are bigger than that. So again, they've got a tall task before them and we don't have a lot of choices. So again, tonight you're essentially approving his contract, saying yes, when we come back, we're okay with the terms of those contracts, and yes, it's okay to go forward with the grant process and see where we are. And then, as I said before, we'll come back to you later and ask you to actually approve the dollars.
What are the options? Because I understand what you just said about limited options and difficulty here. Can you also explain that? I'm just curious as to
The options for disposal or the options if we don't do this?
disposal.
Well, as he said, you acquire property and you put it uplands, you figure out if there's a place where there was an old island where you could do an in-water disposal.
Right, no, I listened to those, but
All of those things that he listed are the options. We don't know which of those are available until he goes through the study to say, that thin layer placement sounds promising.
Right.
But who knows? If it takes 10 years to permit it, then it doesn't help us much in the 2-year window that we have to do some of the things down south, for example.
Well, there's other places that we can look to, and I know Ken's very well aware of them. There's a place up in the northern part of the Chesapeake Bay where they've created an entire ecosystem out of dredge materials with new islands and oyster habitat and bird habitat. And I mean, it's truly something to look at, and it takes a lot of material and it takes a lot of time. So it's something that you can put out there and say, okay, this is what we're going to do. It may take 30 years to accomplish that by, the dredging scope, but for that time period, you have something at the end that is really first class. There's all kinds of different options.
Look at the Manio project. It looks like we're going to have to truck that sand to a location. If you start talking about trucking, then the question becomes, if we pick up sand in Rolliston Channel, you have that area between Frisco and Hatteras Village that you can throw a rock in the ocean in the sound. Mm-hmm. There's an opportunity to widen the beach to protect the highway, to provide some protection for access into Hatteras Village. Those are the kind of things that they're going to look at as options for us where those will work. They do that in other places. Other places don't have to deal with the Park Service or with Fish and Wildlife like we do, but they are done and they can be done. And the protection of the road is important to us as well as the Park Service. So, there's a good opportunity there for us as well.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Commissioner.
The goal of this is to obtain these permits, and that's the first significant step. And as long as we've got these dredge management options, having that out of the way will put us on the next platform.
Agreed.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, what we've talked to Brent a lot about is that some of these more novel approaches are likely to take significantly more amount of money to develop and significantly more amount of time to develop. But what this proposal does is it outlines what those schedules, what those hurdles, what those options, what those costs would be long-term, and it gets the permits in place for the low-hanging fruit so that you have some options in 2 or 3 years from now to be able to do these projects that the Corps has said, you know, we're going to run out of capacity in 2021, 2022. So it's really, we see it as a twofold goal. One, to answer some of those questions that we've had ourselves as to, you know, what are realistic options? What would it take to convince the state of North Carolina that, you know, thin layer placement is something to be done, or island reclamation? Our firm does a lot of work down in southern Louisiana where they're doing an amazing job. It costs a lot of money. There's a lot of federal money going into it, a lot of state money, but literally rebuilding island change on the southern boundary of Louisiana that are protecting all of the estuary behind it. And when we look at some places in the Sound here, behind the Outer Banks, you know, that environment is very similar in some respects. And if we can look for some areas to put some, you know, some wave dampening islands out there to protect some areas from both, you know, erosion and from flooding, you know, that's a win-win solution. But we've got to start talking about it now. You know, the state in and of itself is going to have to go through some changes itself from the regulatory side, as people are more and more aware of challenges of adapting to sea level rise. You know, there are going to have to be some policy changes. So if we can identify some, you know, some real options that we believe in Dare County would help, then we start pushing, you know, at the state level to find out, well, what it's going to take to actually implement some of these ideas that have a win-win solution.
Ken, will you be supportive of approaching the legislature about things? I don't know if the CRC is involved in that or not. But,
Sure.
But
sure.
That will be part of what you do here.
There's a lot of outreach in that task 1 and task 2. There's a lot of local stakeholder discussion, but you know, certainly we go to a lot of presentations. Certainly we'd be happy to you know, go talk to the CRC about some of these ideas, or even up in Raleigh.
Is that something that the board can support as well in terms of meeting with legislators?
The board?
Yeah, us.
Sure. Okay, sure.
We travel.
Yeah.
Anyone else? All right, then, is there a motion to request approval of the submission of the Central Dare County Channel Maintenance and Dredge Material Management Permitting Project to the North Carolina DEQ shallow draft grant? It's been motions on the floor then by Commissioner House. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Commissioner Tobin. Any further discussion? Hearing none, then those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimous, Ken.
All right, great. Well,
Good.
thanks, guys.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you, Ken.
Chairman, with your permission, we'll move back up to item number 3 now. It's 5:35, so we're okay on that time.
Absolutely, yes, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, now's the time that's been set aside for a public hearing on a proposed text amendment to the Highway 345 Business Zoning District. The rules that I laid out a little while ago with regard to public hearings apply here as well. Is there anyone here that would like to speak to that issue? Is there anyone in Buxton that would like to speak to that issue?
No comment from Buxton.
Hearing none, Mr. Chairman, we close the public hearing. The applicant is here with his attorney, as is Noah Gillum from our department, if you have any questions about the issues in this.
Anyone have any questions of the applicant?
I don't have any questions. I thought it was a pretty comprehensive presentation. I understood every bit of it.
Anyone else?
No question.
What action we're taking, County Manager, is?
You would be asking to approve it
Right.
tonight, is that correct?
Is that what we're asking to approve? Okay.
Make a motion to approve.
Okay, it's a motion on the floor to approve by Commissioner Bateman, and it's been seconded by the Vice Chair. Any further discussion? Hearing none, then those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimous.
That brings us to item 7 on the agenda. This is a request for a late application for the 2019 property tax exemption or exclusion, and Hosey Wilson and Maggie Dennis are here for that.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman.
Good evening.
Good evening, Board of Commissioners. This is Maggie Dennis. She is a senior property appraiser for our department, and she also handles all of our property tax relief through homestead and disabled veterans exclusions. So if you have any specific questions about the applicant or about her situation, she'll be happy to answer those. In a nutshell, we have a late application for a homestead exclusion for an elderly taxpayer in Stumpy Point, and the deadline to apply for these is June the 1st. Some background, the taxpayer's husband died in late 2018, and they had qualified previously together and applied in 17 and were granted the exclusion. Because there is a change in ownership, she has to reapply. And at the time of, Mrs. Dennis contacted her on 2 different occasions about the application, and I think at the time her capacity was somewhat limited. There's a letter from her son who now has limited guardianship for her estate. And so they did make application, and we as our department can't consider these after the deadline of June 1st, so they must come to you. So if you have any questions, that's how that works. And if you were to accept the late application, it's kind of a 2-motion process where you would accept or deny receiving the application for the taxpayer. And then at that point, you would make a motion to either approve or deny the request for property tax exclusion.
Mr. Chairman, I have 2 quick questions.
Yes,
Hosey?
Commissioner Ross has some
2 quick questions for you.
Yes, sir.
Is there anything, as I read through all the materials, is there anything in there that would lead you to think it's not accurate or is not being fully disclosed regarding this case?
No, sir.
Specifically, I'm looking at the note or the letter from Roger Best that's on page 80 in our package.
Yes, sir.
So you would find that as accurate and truthful?
Yes, sir, I would.
My
And I
second
think
question
Ms.
was,
Dennis
do you
would.
all have a recommendation for the board regarding this?
Yes, we would recommend acceptance and approval.
Thanks, Jose.
And he does fit the criteria. This case fits the criteria.
Yes, sir, it does. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, she would qualify if not for the late application.
We would have approved it
We would have
otherwise.
approved it.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
And just so we keep the record straight, this is not a discretionary decision. I mean, you've got to make a finding of good cause. The letter tells you why, and you've got to determine that that letter is a good cause shown, and there is no, I can't tell you that good cause has been defined. So you do have the discretion to determine what good cause is.
Okay. Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the request for late application for exemption or exclusion, and also to approve the property tax relief for Wanda.
Yeah, second to both.
There's a motion on the floor by the vice chair to accept the late application and also to approve, to deny exclude the 2019 property tax relief for Wanda M. Best, and it's been seconded by Commissioner Ross. Any further discussion? Do we need to do these individually, or is it okay if we,
I think you're fine.
do we?
Fine as-
Just like that is.
All right. The motion was made jointly, so I just wanted to make sure. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Pose like sign. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Chairman, that brings us to item 8 on the agenda. Item 8 is a release for a settlement that was done by the State Attorney General on our behalf as well as other counties. we did some borrowing some years ago with UBS and some derivatives and things like that. As you may know, I don't know, several years ago, UBS got caught up in some of those lawsuits about manipulating the LIBOR rate over in Europe, and as a result was sued. We've been involved in 2 suits. The first suit, we got $20,000 out of that suit, and then the Attorney General settlement is more recent, and from that we'll be getting $111,454.23 if you all approve the settlement agreement that's in your packet.
Oh, we ain't gonna turn no money down.
Sorry.
I said, we ain't gonna turn no money down.
Because you're getting ready to spend it.
That's right, because we get ready to spend
This is
it.
pays for our dredging project.
All the scouts out there, do you see the way this works, gentlemen?
Are any questions by the board? No. Hearing none, then is there approval to, is there a motion to approve?
Motion to
The
approve.
release and authorize the county manager to execute. It's been motions made by Commissioner House and Bateman. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Commissioner Tobin. Any further discussion? Hearing none, then those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimous.
Chairman, that brings us to item 9 on the agenda. Several meetings ago, you all selected Barnhill as the contractor, construction manager at risk for the COA project. In your packet is the contract that they have submitted to us. I've reviewed that, Dave's reviewed that, Brent's reviewed that, Dustin's reviewed that. We've been through the contract. We've made the changes that we think it aligns with what we did with Whiting Turner and the other contracts that we've entered, and it's there for your approval tonight. If you have questions, and let me know.
Any questions of the county manager?
Nope.
What's the pleasure of the board?
Move to approve.
There's a motion on the floor by the vice chairman to approve the contract and authorize the county manager to execute. And it's been seconded by Commissioner Couch and House. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimous.
I got a question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Is there any kind of, as county manager, is there a time date on this thing? When we're gonna get animal shelter?
This is the COA project.
This is COA. This is COA.
And,
What?
well, on the animal shelter,
Commissioner Bateman,
Ready to go.
you and I are gonna lock arms and march on the county manager's office when the meeting's over.
Here, I've got my camera.
we expect to break ground in February.
I scrolled down, let me
We
explain that. I just
expect.
scrolled down.
I want that captured in the minutes. Dorothy, would you please video
I'll-
record
Yes,
this?
February.
I'll tell you, the limiting factor is getting the sedimentation and erosion control permits from the state. We can't start without that, and we don't have those yet. So,
Okay,
all right,
thank you.
that brings us to item 10 on the agenda. As a part of our work on the affordable housing projects, Commissioner Overman and Commissioner Ross and I went up to Chapel Hill and met with the folks at the school government who do essential housing, workforce housing, they call it lots of things, and talked to them about how to get affordable housing or essential housing off the ground in Dare County. We were sort of spinning wheels. We've got one site that we've been trying to market. The chamber's been trying to help us market and help bring in people to do that. And we went and talked to them at some length and found that we sort of didn't really know enough about it. We didn't know what we were doing in that regard. There's a lot of technical, complicated things that make projects attractive to the private sector. They obviously have a profit motive, and there's ways to do that if you do it correctly and all that. So in our discussions, what they suggested is that we do 2 things. One is that we do a long-term affordable housing plan where they would go out and identify sites, qualify those sites to be sure they're eligible for the tax credits and the things that make it affordable. Try to identify the number of units that we have is something that I know Commissioner Ross has been struggling to try to find for a lot of time, and we haven't been able to do that. They're going to do their study to try to do that. they'll look at, the income demographics and decide, how big an area. They have statistics that know that if you're a waiter, that you'll drive X number of miles or X number of minutes to get to work. And so they can know that if they're going to try to meet that demographic, they got to keep it in, in that distance. You can't expect somebody to drive over here from Williamston. So they have that information, and they're come in and put a plan. That's what they've shown on here as their phase one. And that would be a long-term, sort of an ongoing effort. The phase two is once they identify those plans and identify those sites, is to go out and actually solicit developers to come in and develop those sites, show them why they're attractive, show them what the demographics are, show them how they make money, and where they want, tell us, if you want to do affordable housing, here's what the gap is between what a developer can put in it and what you're going to have to subsidize it, whether you subsidize construction costs, whether you subsidize rent. If you want to meet this demographic, the development community can only go this far, and they'll tell you that, and we can decide then what, if anything, we want to do to invest in those projects.
It's items 11 and 12 on the attached agreement.
And so it sounds like in that program, they'll do the study first, and then they'll come in and identify and solicit developers second. We know that we have one site already, and that's the Bowsertown site. And so simultaneous with them doing the strategic plan, if you will, they will work and make sure the Bowsertown site qualifies for all the funding and tax credits and things that are out there. And assuming that it does, they'll go out then and solicit those builders to do that. Again, you asked about timing. Commissioner Ross asked me about timing. The strategic plan, these kind of things, they're talking about a short term, 90 days, 120 days kind of time frame to do that. And they're talking about, 60 to 90 days at max trying to do the Bowsertown. So they're going to be on this quickly. The 120 day for the overall plan may be ambitious. I think when they come down and find some of the limitations that we have, it may take them longer than that. But they certainly said that the Bowsertown site is something that they thought they could get going pretty quickly for us. So that's where we are. To do that, they've got a proposal in your packet. Their cost to us for that proposal was $85.3.
That's with the discounts.
If you choose to go forward with that I told you were going to spend that settlement money, that's where we're going to get the funds from. I have a budget amendment that I'd ask you to approve that would take those funds to apply to the affordable housing, and then take the balance of that settlement proceeds and put them in our contingency fund, because we're going to have Ken coming back in a few weeks, and we're going to need a place to pay for some of that as well.
So this was an informational presentation.
No, sir.
You're now, according to the agenda it is, and now you're saying that if we go along with this, we've got to approve the budget for that.
If you don't have to do anything. If you can approve it tonight,
Right.
and if you approve it, then you have to, for us to pay for it, you have to approve that
Right, I
budget.
understand, but
Yeah.
according to the agenda item, it was informational purposes, but
That is correct. I just saw that as well, Mr. Chairman.
so,
My bad.
so.
Well, we just
but-
got the information. Can we approve it now?
Yeah, well, that's my question. That was my next question. Having this information I don't mind moving forward if the board is comfortable moving forward, but as a
Absolutely.
fairness to the board, I wanted to make sure they were comfortable with the informational presentation.
I move to approve having UNC School of Government move forward with this at post haste.
Yeah, I would agree with Vice Chairman Overman. The presentation that they made to us and discussion that ensued was about 2 hours long while we were in Chapel Hill. And we asked quite a few probing questions. They had answers. They understand this. I don't want to say they do it for a living because it's a nonprofit with the School of Government, but this is what they do every day for counties and local governments throughout the state. So as far as are we getting an unbiased, fair, and properly motivated to assist us organization to help us, we are. So I felt very positively toward them as well, and would endorse Vice Chairman Overman's
Totally agree, and they are with you on these projects, but they don't just come drop it off in your lap and say bye. They stay with you right on through the project.
It's
So
ongoing support.
yeah, so it's first-class operation.
Okay. Well, there's a motion on the floor then by the vice chair to approve the opportunity site identification and pre-development services to Dare County for essential housing needs by the UNC School of Government. And it's been seconded by Commissioner Ross. And I'm going to open the floor for further discussion if you have any concern in the presentation.
I don't have any concern in the presentation. The only thing is I've reached out to other counties that have done similar projects with the School of Government, and all of their recommendations were extremely high. I have no problem moving forward with this whatsoever.
Anyone else on the board?
I just think it's a value. I really do.
All right, with that being said then, those in favor of this motion before us signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimous. Thank you, County Manager.
That would bring us to the consent agenda. On the consent agenda, you have the approval of the minutes from the last meeting. You have the Dare County Public Health Division Community Linkages to Care Overdose Prevention and Response Grant. You have the tax collector's report. You have a resolution from the North Carolina Governor's Highway Safety Program, and you have the retirement of a deputy sheriff's K-9 named Diablo.
Pleasure of the board.
Motion to approve.
There you go. Second.
As a motion on the floor, I believe by Commissioner House and, was it Ross? Tobin? Ross. And it was seconded by Commissioner Bateman. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimous.
Next are your board appointments. You have two tonight. One's the Dare County Transportation Advisory Board. The Dare County Transportation Advisory Board recommends that you appoint George Carver Jr. to fill the public business section vacancy, and they'll make recommendations to fill the other vacancies at a later date. We have applications from Catherine Fagan and George Carver Jr.
Pleasure of the board.
Move to appoint George Carver.
Motion on the floor by Commissioner House to appoint George Carver Jr. to fill one of the public business sector's vacancy. Is there a seconded by Commissioner Couch? Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimous.
Next is the Dare County Joint Community Advisory Committee, or the Nursing Home Community Advisory Council, is sometimes called. They serve as an advocate through monitoring of care and resolution of grievances of nursing home patients and their families. They meet when needed. There's 2 vacancies on there. This is that one where you have to get pre-approved to be on there. Amber Jennings and Bonnie Bennett have completed that training and have been pre-approved, and they're both recommended for appointment for 1-year terms.
Pleasure of the board.
Motion to approve Bonnie Bennett and Amber Jennings to be my partners.
There's a motion on the floor by Commissioner Tobin. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner House. Further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimous.
And that'd be your agenda, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to say that their first meeting will be tomorrow. We're doing
Oh, wow.
a tour of both the homes tomorrow.
You don't waste
the ground running.
You don't waste
Hit the
no
ground
time.
running.
You might want to notify them.
They know.
That brings us to item 13 on the agenda, that's Commissioner's business. And I would ask the Vice Chairman if he wouldn't mind kicking that off this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Don't have much. Just want to mention that I did attend a week-long conference 2 weeks ago, put together by the I2I regarding mental health and substance abuse issues. The conference had a lot of good speakers, a lot of good presentations, not the least of which was Secretary Cohen of the State Department of Health and Human Services, and a lot of, well, virtually all of what she had to talk about was the Medicaid transformation that is going on in North Carolina. That is currently suspended while they continue to iron out issues with it. It will continue to be suspended until such time those things are ironed out. And it is truly indefinite at this point, so we'll see how it goes. I think the word indefinite is probably underlined, but we'll see what happens. It's a big step, not only for the state, but also for the MCOs and for the counties in North Carolina as well, so we'll see how that goes. Other than that, I'd like to wish everyone in Dare County a Merry Christmas and a safe and Happy New Year. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chairman. Commissioner Bateman.
Yes, sir. Went out yesterday to the Candy Bomber flyover. It was really neat. And the thing as the plane was going around and circling around, it did it like three times before it dropped the stuff. I kind of just visualized how it was back when they were dropping the goods off to people who really, really needed it, when they had that blockade for the Soviet Union. And makes you appreciate what we have here in the United States and America and so forth. And it was, when they dropped those little parachutes with the Hershey's in them, those kids just hauled it, buddy, and ran out and got them.
How many did you run over?
I stood and watched everybody. We had a good time, though. And also want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. You know, there's a lady, and I can't think of her name. I'm not sure if she's still living or not. I think she is.
Karen.
Karen.
She was out there.
She was out there.
Yeah, she was.
She was one of the kids in Berlin.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
She's one
But
of
phenomenal story, a phenomenal lady, and if you ever get a chance, talk to her about it. It's pretty interesting.
comes in the restaurant all the time. She's
Yeah.
a good customer.
Yeah.
Sweet lady.
So.
She's an advocate for the Candy Bomber, let me tell you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Follows you around.
Absolutely.
She really does.
Yeah.
I would bet.
Commissioner Couch?
Yes, sir, and in line with Commissioner Bateman's comments, tomorrow is the anniversary of flight. It occurred here. Our place is sealed in history with mankind's greatest achievement. And if you get a chance to get out tomorrow morning, they'll do a flyover, I hope, of some consequence around 10:35 when the first flights occurred, December 17th, 1903. But the weather will hang in there. Come on out and experience a salute to mankind's greatest achievement tomorrow morning at the Wright Memorial.
Yep. Thank you, Commissioner.
Merry Christmas, everybody. We're in the Christmas season. We're in the Christmas mode, so I've cut the business off, and I'm just ready to enjoy some peace.
Absolutely.
Is that 9 or 9:30?
Believe.
It's at 9:30. It's at 9:30. Luncheon is at noon, so, thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Tobin?
Okay, last week, Commissioner House, myself, and County Manager Bobby went down to the Workboat Show in New Orleans and met with 7 different shipbuilders. Very comprehensive day. Met with a lot of the suppliers, the people who are going to make the outdrives, people who are making the motors. I mean, the whole 9 yards. We basically ruled out one shipbuilder, but other than that, we've got 6 to choose from, and looking forward to getting the RFP out. The RFP should be out sometime.
2029 will be here before you know it.
It's gonna be done, the ship will be finished and christened right before the animal shelter.
Right in February 2029.
But I also would like to wish everybody a Merry Christmas, and I have a lot of Jewish friends too, so Happy Hanukkah to them, and Happy New Year.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Ross?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last week, I just want to update everybody. I had the opportunity to sit in at the Rotary Club Luncheon, North Banks Rotary, and Senator Steinberg was there, spoke to us, addressed the group, and spoke on a topic I wasn't that aware of regarding our penal system and the prisons and penitentiaries that are throughout the state, conditions therein, and it was both moving and very eloquent. He is very highly engaged and will be personally visiting every one of the sites throughout the state in the coming weeks and months. And is focused on working to contribute to that in a positive way for both the staff, which was interesting in his discussion, and the working conditions, as well as those of the residents. He also heard, because I talked to him about it, our work with Essential Housing and the UNC School of Government, and was very, very pleased to hear our progress and offered any support he might be able to offer from the legislature. Number two, this week at the Dare County Center is the Kids Toy Week. They break it down into age groups with the very littlest ones on Thursday. That's the 0 to 4. That's when I'll be there as the miniature green elf. It's all part of the spirit, Mr. Chairman.
You're gonna be a
Don't you
miniature
scare them.
Yes, I'm the mini
Scare
elf.
those
I'd
kids.
hate to see the big one.
It's fun.
Ain't
It is a great
seen a
time.
6'5"
Elf.
It's a great time. The kids are cute as buttons, and the staff there does a marvelous job. We had Terry Gray and the motorcycle group here recently. They gave $16,500 towards it. Their bicycles, tablets, these are for the older kids, of course, and the little ones get age-appropriate gifts. It is very, very pleasant, and just something that we as a county can feel very proud of in the way the community responds. We had some very unfortunate, unexpected, and sad news last week. Commissioner Marion Gilbert of Currituck County, who I served with on the Albemarle Commission, passed away unexpectedly and suddenly, and her service and funeral services were last week. We had representatives of Albemarle Commission there, and I just want to make note that Marion was a terrific lady and will be missed. I read today an article. I'm going on now to the Outer Banks event site in Nags Head. And the Outer Banks Voice published an article where it referenced discussions with Lee Nettles, myself, and others on the advisory board. And I don't really have a lot to report other than we are working through the issues of keeping focus on what is the goal. And I shared with the advisory group that oftentimes if we spend enough time appropriately at the beginning defining the goal, we can move forward through the execution process. What often happens is, do we have a goal? Yeah, we have a goal. Well, what we haven't realized is on this board there may be 7 different goals in our minds, and we haven't articulated and documented specifically what it is we are attempting to achieve. And then later down the road, we find ourselves spinning in circles. So I'm working real hard to get a clarification on what strategic, highest and best use of this 15-plus acres could mean for both the county of Dare, the town of Nags Head, the shoulder season business community, overnight stays, economic development, and more high-paying full-year jobs. And I will keep you all posted as that proceeds. Commissioner Couch, on behalf of the board, I know you and your family are going through some personal health issues in the family, and we wish you our very best.
Thank you, Rob.
Okay. And lastly, I just want to say, and I will not equivocate on this, I want to dispel the rumor. There have been no articles of impeachment introduced on Chairman Woodard. That is not true. Those articles were never forwarded.
Where'd that come from? Where'd that come from?
Time will tell.
Everywhere I turn, there's articles of impeachment in the news, and I want to make sure this county knows we do not have any.
Yeah.
I am finished.
Hello.
Thank you, sir.
Commissioner House.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First and foremost, I want to wish a very Merry Christmas to all of my fellow commissioners, our staff here in Dare County, and all of our citizens in Dare County. This is a time of year where we all kind of come together and celebrate being a big family. In Dare County, we do that on a daily basis. And so to make it a special time of year, well, it always is here in Dare County. If you have any friendship or neighbor or even somebody you don't even know, if they're having a hard time, citizens in Dare County come together and help those people. That's what Christmas is about, and that's what Dare County is about. So we have Christmas every day here. In our consent agenda, we retired K-9 Diablo. With his 10 years of service to the sheriff's office, and his 10 years of service to citizens of Dare County, I commend his service and wish him a happy retirement and all the milk bones he can actually enjoy for the rest of his life. With that being said, we do not have a pet of the week from the SPCA. However, it is the Christmas season. Spend some time, donate a toy for the SPCA, for the dogs and the cats that are there. Or you can donate some food to them too. That would also be helpful. If you want to go one step further, go to the SPCA. Even if you don't adopt a pet, just go down there and play with them. And that will mean a great deal to the pets there and also fulfillment of your own self. You'll be amazed how good you'll feel about yourself just by donating a little bit of time and playing to those animals that don't have a home this Christmas. On tomorrow evening at 6 o'clock, right here in this room, scoping meeting for the flounder fishery. This is a time when we can actually voice our opinions and our concerns to the Marine Fisheries Commission before they develop the amendment. This is the time that we can put our most input into it before it's presented or before it's written. As with our as I normally do on our commissioners meeting, I put in a history note. Obviously, tomorrow, first of flight. I'll forego that. Everybody knows that. I want to reflect on a little bit of Dare County's history. Do we have that set up, ready to go?
Here's
Gentlemen, if you'll look at your monitors, please. This past week, we lost Sammy Pledger. Sammy enjoyed a long career in law enforcement, including the U.S. Coast Guard, the U.S. Immigration and Naturalization Border Patrol, Marine Mania Police Department, Dare County EMS helicopter pilot, and he had several positions within the Sheriff's Office, including the Civil and Court Defense Criminal Investigation Division and a Detention Center Commander. Sammy was a good friend of mine. He was actually one of the first people I met when I moved here to Dare County. And when you shook Sammy's hand, you knew he was a member or a person of honor and respect. He stepped up when their med flight went down in Currituck. He stepped up and became the chief pilot. And he was one of our rocks in EMS that kept us strong. I had the misfortune of recovering some of the equipment from the crashed helicopter. And when I brought it over to the hangar, I wasn't saying a word. I just unloaded it, put it in the hangar. Sammy, who was a very close friend to Cece and Stephanie, even closer than I was, and I know he was going through a whole lot more pain than I was. When I put that equipment down in the hangar, and I was just kind of looking at it, thinking to myself, this is all we have left. Without even saying a word, Sammy walked up behind me, put his hand on my shoulder, and simply said, they're in a much better place now. That meant the world to me, and he was a rock throughout that whole terrible situation. Sammy, I can honestly say he's in a much better place. I want you to fly high, my friend, in the blue skies above. Your end of watch is done. We'll stand here proudly knowing you and continuing on. Semper Paratus, my friend. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner House. Just another reminder of tomorrow, 116th anniversary of flight. It's kind of hard to believe. It's been another 16 years since we celebrated the 100 years back in 16 years ago. It's quite, I was served on the tourism board then, and it was quite an event. We had the president here. We had John Travolta fly in.
It was a beautiful day.
Pardon?
It was a beautiful day.
Well, I don't know about that.
It was
It was pretty nasty,
so bad.
pretty nasty day. But It's hard to believe, 116 years. Looking forward to that tomorrow and the luncheon and the event. So just a reminder, those of you out there that are in town, please go to it. You'll be impressed. That brings us to county manager business.
Yes, sir, just a couple of things. One is our holiday trash collection, the C&D landfill in Buxton Transfer Station, the Rodanthe Recycle Center, and the Manio Recycle Yard will be closed on the 24th, 25th, and 26th, and they'll be closed again on January 1st. For our residential collection, we'll pick up on Monday, December 23rd in Kitty Hawk, Cogton, Buxton, Frisco, and Hatteras. There'll be no trash collection on the 24th, the 25th, and the 26th. On December 27th, we'll pick up in Manio, East Lake, Mans Harbor, Stumpy Point, Rodanthe Way, Salvo, and Avon. And our commercial collection will be on Monday, December 23rd, and Friday, December 20th. There's no changes in the residential collection on the week of December 30th through January 3rd. That's on our website for anybody that wants to see it, but I thought we would get it out there for the public to know what the trash collection schedule is going to be. Some good news, people often ask, do your resolutions do any good? We got a letter last week from Dominion Power. Dominion Power on the causeway is going to go in, take one circuit and put it on metal poles and take the other circuit and bury it underground. And they're proposing to have all this done before the 2020 hurricane season. So
Hallelujah.
good news for the folks that need that circuit for their power. And again, sometimes our resolutions do some good.
This calls for a resolution.
Yep.
We should write a letter to them thanking them.
Bobby.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
most definitely.
Bobby, what's the
Happens,
significance?
I'm gonna give him a hand.
Yeah.
What's the significance of one on metal poles and the other one buried? I mean, why not bury them both?
One
Why not
above
put 'em-
ground is the one that has to have the circuit come
Transmission.
off of it to get to the businesses along the bypass. It can't pull
Gotcha.
them up underground.
Gotcha, okay. All right.
One's transmission, the other.
And then the last thing that I have is, Brent came to me, our stormwater management plan is old and it's time to renew it, and Donna has been trying to figure out how to work on it. Brent found some FEMA grant money that will, hopefully, if we are accepted, will pay for some or all of that, and before we can move forward, I need your authority to move forward with that grant.
Move to approve.
There's a motion on the floor by Commissioner House, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Tobin. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimous.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Hope y'all have a really Merry Christmas.
Thank you, County Manager. Dorothy, our Public Information Officer, do you have anything for us this evening?
I would also wish y'all a happy Christmas, and 2020 is upon us. It's hard to believe, a new decade. We'll be really starting to push the chairman's state of the county, and I hope all of you all can attend. I'm planning to register all of you for the event.
Thank you.
And then the census, Donna and I, as your co-chairs for our Complete Count Committee, we've been meeting with lots of different groups. We met with the hospital last week. We're meeting with Children and Youth Partnership, the schools. We've got a great committee, and we'll be kicking that off in January and then building upon that as Census Day arrives April 1st. So time just keeps ticking.
Dorothy, do you know if they're getting good response to the number of census takers? I know the number was quite large. They were looking for thousands of people to do the work.
They are still advertising for a census worker. I know that they had over in Nags Head at the job center, they were actually set up over there last week trying to get some folks. That's a good point, because there are some census jobs. And those are people that will be in the field that aren't able to respond or don't respond. At some point, folks start knocking on your door. So we're going to encourage everybody to respond in mid-March, April, so they don't get a knock at their door.
Very good. Thank you, Dorothy. Our finance director is out sick this evening, so I hope he's will be on the recovery very soon, so he's not able to be with us this evening. That brings us to a motion to adjourn until January the 6th, 2020. It's hard to believe, just like Dorothy said, a new decade.
Motion to adjourn the Dare County Commissioners for the remainder of the year.
There's a motion on the floor to adjourn for the remainder of the year. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Tobin. Those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimous.